Welcome back, everyone. In this episode of Duty and Valor, I'm going to tell you the story about a U.S. Army Air Force's World War II pilot whose fearless flying skills would allow him to attain 40 aerial victories in the skies over the South Pacific, a number that has not been achieved by any other American pilot to date. Courageously, even when he was assigned to a non-combat role, he would put himself in danger by voluntarily flying combat missions. And it was this selflessness and valor that would see him earning the Medal of Honor. This is the story of U.S. Army Air Force Major Richard Bong, the Ace of Aces. Born on September 24, 1920 in Superior, Wisconsin, Richard Dick Bong was the oldest of 9 children born to Carl and Dora Bryce. Dick graduated from Central High School in 1938 before heading to Superior State Teachers College. His early love of flying led him to enroll in the Civilian Pilot Training Program, and in May of 1941, before the U.S. entered the war, he enlisted in the Army Air Corps Aviation Cadet Program, where he would begin to hone his flying skills, and he would soon be recognized as a promising combat pilot. On January 19, 1942, Dick was awarded his pilot's wings and was commissioned a second lieutenant. He was temporarily assigned as an instructor at Luke Field, Arizona, before heading to California in May of that year. And it was there that he would be seated in the type of aircraft that he would master and later use to menace Japanese pilots, the Lockheed P-38 Lightning. In July, Lieutenant Bong was now assigned to the 14th Fighter Group, but his unit would head to England without him. Lieutenant Bong, along with 3 other pilots, had been temporarily grounded because they flew low over the house of a recently married fellow pilot, and there were reports of them flying loops around the Golden Gate Bridge. After being transferred to the 78th Fighter Group, Lieutenant Bong and his unit were sent to the Southwest Pacific Theater. Lieutenant Bong arrived in Australia, where he was transferred between different units before ending up with the Flying Knights of the 9th Fighter Squadron, 49th Fighter Group. It was there that his experience would be instrumental in training pilots of other types of aircraft to now fly the P-38. By the time November came, he was temporarily transferred to another unit due to the scarcity of the P-38. Lieutenant Bong and other pilots of his unit joined the 39th Fighter Squadron in Papua New Guinea. There he quickly gained combat experience, and on December 27th, Lieutenant Bong scored his first 2 aerial victories against a Mitsubishi Zero and a Nakajima Oscar, which led him to being awarded the Silver Star. Over the following days, Lieutenant Bong saw a lot of combat action, and by January 8th he would officially be called an ace, as he was credited with downing his 5th enemy aircraft of the war. By January of 1943, he was back with the 9th as they were re-equipped with the P-38s. He was promoted to First Lieutenant in April, which is around the time he claimed his 9th and 10th aerial victories of the war. In an article printed in the Courier Mail out of Queensland in June, it was written that Lieutenant Bong was in support of a rescue mission of a downed pilot when he saw a crocodile in pursuit of a raft containing 3 fellow pilots, who were paddling towards the downed pilot. He brought his P-38 down to a lower altitude where he was able to hit the crocodile with rounds from his P-38's 20mm gun. This allowed the men to complete their rescue mission. A few months later, Lieutenant Bong and the 9th were seeing heavy action over Papua New Guinea, and he would remarkably shoot down 4 enemy aircraft on July 26th alone. On that day, he scored victories against 2 Japanese Zeros, an Oscar, and 2 Ki-61 Tonys, and by August he would attain the rank of captain. Combat sorties in October and early November would see Captain Bong down another 5 Japanese aircraft, bringing his total aerial victories of the war to 21. He would take a much-deserved leave from his unit in November and December, where he would return back home to Superior. While at a homecoming dance at Superior State, Captain Bong met Marjorie Vatndal, and the two began dating soon after. Unfortunately, his leave was short-lived and he had to return back to the Pacific. As many were forced to do during the war, Captain Bong and Marjorie would correspond via mail, where a mutual love would blossom between them. Now back with his unit, Captain Bong would adorn the nose of his P-38 with the image of his new love, and he would call his plane Marge. Up to this point in U.S. military history, the record of 26 aerial victories was held by Captain Eddie Rickenbacker, the Medal of Honor recipient who gained fame during World War I. But on April 12th, Captain Bong would surpass Captain Rickenbacker after he was credited with downing 2 more Japanese aircraft, the 26th and 27th of the war. Rickenbacker personally congratulated Captain Bong on his achievement. Now a major, he would again briefly return to the US in a wartime bond tour before returning to Papua New Guinea in September. Through the later months of 1944, Major Bong would be assigned as a staff officer and gunnery instructor of the 5th Fighter Command. What would normally be a quiet assignment for any distinguished pilot, Major Bong sought after and received permission to fly missions, though he was not given permission to seek out combat. But this directive didn't stop Major Bong from engaging the enemy and increasing the number of his aerial victories. His actions were instrumental in saving the lives of his fellow pilots as well as the lives of the bomber crews, which they were often tasked with supporting. The Far East Air Force Commander, General Kenny, recommended that Major Bong receive the Medal of Honor for selflessly joining combat missions when he wasn't required or expected to. During this time, he downed an additional 12 enemy aircraft, bringing his total to 40 aerial victories. In December of 1944, in a ceremony at Tacloban Airfield in the Philippines, General Douglas MacArthur placed the Medal of Honor upon U.S. Army Air Force Major Richard Bong, the ace of aces. After returning back home in January of 1945, Major Bong would again support the war bond drive, and his celebrity would also help keep up the morale of the Americans back home. He would go on to marry Marge on February 10th. After the end of his combat flying career, Major Bong couldn't stomach the thought of doing anything but flying, which led him to become a test pilot, first at Wright Field in Ohio and then in Burbank, California. There he flew the Lockheed P-80 Shooting Star, America's first jet to be used operationally. On August 6, 1945, which was only his 12th flight in a P-80, Major Bong's jet crashed on takeoff as its fuel pump malfunctioned. Sadly, he wasn't able to deploy his parachute and was killed. Major Bong was just weeks shy of his 25th birthday. Unbefitting his legacy, the news of his passing did not make newspaper headlines as it should have, as the reports of his death were overshadowed by the news that the US had dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima. His death would mark the untimely end to the storied military career of Major Richard Bong, the ace of aces. To learn more about Major Bong, there are 2 books that I recommend. The first was written by Major Bong's brother Carl, who wrote a biography about his brother titled Dear Mom, So We Have a War. And then there's the highly rated book that General Kelly wrote titled Dick Bong, Ace of Aces. Thank you for listening, and if you enjoyed this week's show, we kindly ask that you follow us and leave a review and 5-star rating. Links to the sources for today's show can be found in the show notes. And join us next week where we'll tell you the story of another true American hero.